Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. Hearthstone's Murder at Castle Nathria expansion has been live for a week, and obviously at this point the talk of the town starts to be, hey, what about nerfs? What about balance changes? When are we going to get a balance patch, and what should that balance patch include? We already got confirmation that there is no balance patch this week. There's going to be a Masters Tour tournament and the weekend, but next week is already fair game, so anything could happen next week. But what should the balance patch do? Overall, I think balance patches generally should weaken the very strongest decks a little, especially if they're very dominant, and also buff up the weakest classes. Sometimes you can just do nerfs, and that will also give weakest classes a chance, but this time we have some really weak classes in the game, and I don't think nerfs alone are going to be enough to fix this. On the other hand, what sort of nerfs do we even need? When you look at card statistics, like card statistics in isolation, you can see that there are some cards that are super strong to keep in the mulligan, and also when they're drawn, so they're just very powerful. There are cards like Hydra Standard, Imp King Rafam, and Balinda Stoneheart. What really separates these from other just genuinely good cards, like Collateral Damage for example, is that you really want to keep the stuff in your mulligan. Like, Collateral Damage is a strong card for Hunter, but it's not a card that you ever keep in the mulligan. It's an expensive card. Expensive cards don't really belong in your mulligan, but then again, some of them actually do. It as it may, just being a strong card doesn't necessarily mean that the card deserves a nerf. I don't think Balinda Stoneheart is particularly oppressive. I don't think Imp King Rafam is particularly oppressive. Hydra Standard, we can talk about Hydra Standard a little bit later as we look into these decks a little bit more. The first thing that I want to discuss is the eternal discussion, hey, Druid. Yeah, Druid can be very annoying because Druid just ramps up. When Druid successfully ramps up, it gets to do a lot of stuff and then it just wins games. On the other hand, sometimes Druid doesn't ramp up or doesn't ramp up fast enough, and then Druid is just getting killed. So yeah, a lot of stuff can happen when Druids are involved. But two Druid cards in particular are often talked about. One of them is Wildheart Guff. And yeah, Wildheart Guff is really good. It's a great card to give in the mulligan, it's a great card to draw at any point in the game. Wildheart Guff is borderline broken, but only borderline, so I'm not sure I really want to nerf Wildheart Guff, especially because Druid is not doing any better than it is right now. However, the other Druid card that people often talk about, Celestial Alignment, I totally would be on board for nerfing Celestial Alignment, but not for power reasons. Celestial Alignment decks are not doing that great. They are not even the strongest Druid decks. The regular Ramp Druid is stronger than Celestial Alignment at the moment, but it can always change because Celestial Alignment is a very polarizing card. It's the most polarizing card and most polarizing archetype in the game. It just instantly loses a whole bunch of matchups, and then it's super oppressive in other matchups. And I think that really leaves very little Hearthstone to actually be played, and that's why I would not be sorry to see Celestial Alignment be nerfed into oblivion, just because of that polarization aspect. That would make it even more important to not touch Guff, so that Druid will still have Guff, so Druid will still have access to power. But then looking at balance patch candidates from the power perspective, we start to look into deck archetypes and how decks are doing, and right now the most oppressive deck in the game is Control Shaman. Control Shaman just doesn't seem to have any weaknesses, and it's really strong in some matchups, it's mediocre in others, but it's still somehow favored pretty much everywhere it goes. And this is a product of the new expansion. Control Shaman got a very powerful win condition in Hydra Standard. Control Shaman is very good at using Hydra Standard. It can use it with Bran, it can use it with Bolner, it can store the battle cry in the Brilliant Macaw. That's just so many things Control Shaman can do with Hydra Standard. Hydra Standard has splendid fit into the archetype. Add to that Control Shaman already had tools like Snowfall Guardian, which also goes well with Brilliant Macaw, in order to just completely lock out any board-based decks from the game, and then a very defensive hero card in Brukan of the Elements. So Control Shaman now just has such a great toolkit, really uncomparable toolkit at the moment. And these four cards are basically the best cards in Control Shaman. So if we want to somehow touch Control Shaman, we probably have to start by touching some of these. Snowfall Guardian was already nerfed once, it used to cost 5 mana, and I wouldn't mind Snowfall Guardian taking another hit. I wouldn't mind Brilliant Macaw taking a hit. I also wouldn't really mind Sire Denatrius being nerfed, to be honest. Maybe like Battlecry deal 1 damage amongst enemies, and then Endless Infuse 1 deal 1 more. You can't really nerf its mana cost, it already costs 10 mana. Nerfing its stats is irrelevant. It being a 10 then doesn't really do anything. So the only thing that you can nerf is somehow nerf the effect. It would of course also be Endless Infuse 2, deal 1 more. There's some alternatives on what you could do. But Sire Denatrius is just giving Control Shaman so much right now. I suppose it is also used in decks like Druid, for example, but still, Control Shaman is the one where it makes the biggest difference. So yeah, I would not be opposed at all to Sire Denatrius dealing a little bit less damage, and Snowfall Guardian coming in a little later, thereby opening Shaman for threats against aggro decks, and then also giving Shaman a little bit less powerful finisher, even though those Macaws can still do a ton with even smaller Denatrius. There are also other powerful decks in the game apart from Control Shaman. One deck that people have of course been talking about like is Imp Warlock, although Imp Warlock numbers are going down quite steadily. Today it already reached 20% in popularity, where it was 30% at its peak. So 1/3 of Imp Warlock players have given up on the class and have started to play something else. If you want to touch Imp Warlock, somehow Imp Warlock is still very strong. The definite outlier in that deck is File Library. Give friendly minion +1/+1, repeat for each imp you control. So you could make this give friendly minion +1/+1 for each imp you control, I guess. You could make it more expensive. There would be some alternatives on how you could nerf it if you really want to nerf Imp Warlock. And in addition to Imp Warlock, there's the question of hunters. Face Hunter, Quest Hunter, super powerful right now. And the most powerful card in both of those decks is Wild Spirits. 3 mana, summon 2 different dormant Wild Seeds, make Wild Seeds awaken 1 turn sooner. So probably touching that somehow could help, but I'm not even sure if that helps truly against Quest Hunter, because Quest Hunter has a whole bunch of other very powerful cards, like Wound Prey and Arcane Shot are both doing super well in that deck. It's just like Blizzard has painted itself into a corner with Quest Hunter. Whenever you give Hunter spells that deal damage, well, Quest Hunter becomes better. And as the standard card pool becomes bigger, there's going to be more spells for it to choose, and it's just going to deal so much damage. And it's kind of hard. Overall, many of these questlines have limited the design space, especially in Standard. In Wild, there are so many other broken things that they can kind of counter the questline broken things. But in Standard, there isn't. And then when questlines, they just wait, okay, can we get a single card, maybe 2 cards in an expansion that we can put into this questline deck to make it stronger, and boom, off we go again. Then that is kind of a big problem for Hearthstone right now. So I would probably touch Wild Spirits a little, and I think I would touch Arcane Shot. Sad times, but Quest Hunter is getting to that quest completion in Standard format a little bit too fast for the power level of the meta. Finally, there is one more super strong deck in the metagame, and if you nerf Control Shaman, then that deck threatens to become the dominant meta tyrant, and that deck is Naga Priest. And Naga Priest, yeah, Serpent Week was buffed already. Serpent Week used to give +1/+1 for 1 mana, then it was buffed to give +1/+2, which kind of made Naga Priest a thing. But now Naga Priest is this very oppressive, aggressive deck, where the deck is basically a game of can I draw my wig or not. If you find your wig, yeah, great, you just added like 15% to your win chances. If you don't find your wig, well, that's really too bad, isn't it? You're probably not going to win, although you still have some chances to do so. And Naga Priest got a bunch of new improvements in Murder at Castle Nathria, but none of those improvements by themselves are that awesome, like Cathedral of Atonement, okay, Boon of the Ascended. There's useful cards, but none of those are really oppressive by themselves, so I would even consider reverting the buff to Serpent Week. Give it back to +1/+1. Because now Naga Priest has more tools than it had when Serpent Week was buffed, so maybe that could somehow do something. On the other hand, it might also just completely kill the archetype, and that means that, yeah, Priest is kind of out of luck, except for Quest Priest maybe having a bit more of a chance in that scenario. But balancing Priest is hard, balancing that Control Shaman is hard, but those two decks are very strong, borderline oppressive at the moment, and you probably would want to find some answers to that, as well as to Hunter, and maybe to Warlock, although Warlock probably is more of a low rank issue than a high rank issue at the moment. Those are all of the problem decks in the meta right now, and then there's problem classes, but the problem is quite the opposite. Like, let's say Rogue, for example, like Secret Rogue with its marvelous legendary Halkias. Death Rattle, if you control Secret Store, Halkias Soul inside of it. That card is totally useless. Secret Rogue is really, really bad. Secret Rogue, all the secrets are the worst cards in Secret Rogue. And like Rogue is pretty bad. Rogue has some hope in like Quest Rogue maybe being able to do things. Hey, those quest lines once again. But other than that, Rogue just doesn't have much of anything. And like, how can you even polish a third? How can you polish a third? Because all the Rogue cards that Rogue got in this expansion, they are so awful. I mean, there's that Miracle Rogue idea where you just create that huge 19-20 damage dagger and poke people to death with that. Yeah, I guess you can do that, but do you really want to promote that as a very common archetype? Not really. So Rogue has a huge problem in that the archetypes that are being pushed are just really silly, really bad, poor design, and the old archetypes just don't have what it takes. And the most promising old archetype is Quest Rogue, which is already a year old. Like, so many problems with Rogue. The best thing I could figure out for Rogue would probably be a buff to Shroud of Concealment. Maybe you could make Shroud cost only 2 mana. That would give Rogue more card draw. The problem is that this is also promoting Quest Rogue more than the other archetypes. But at least it would give a Rogue one good card draw tool that it could use in some kind of Thief Rogue packages as well. But the new archetypes that are being pushed for Rogue, they're just not worth buffing. And Paladin has a very similar problem. Paladin got this pure Paladin being pushed and tokens being pushed, and neither of them works, and pure Paladin has the Countess as a win condition, and the Countess sucks. Like, yeah, what can you really do about it? On the other hand, Paladin has like Mech Paladin, Hand Buff Paladin, Holy Paladin, the old Paladin archetypes, which are still reasonably okay. And especially if you take a little bit of power away from the top meta tyrants at the moment, those Paladin decks could actually be competitive. So maybe Paladin just doesn't need anything, but it doesn't get to play any new archetypes either. But again, the problem with polishing those thirds, how do you do that? It's just pretty hard. But whereas Rogue and Paladin got super dull new sets for themselves, they still have at least some of the old decks to play with. But there are two classes that really didn't get much of anything. I wrote about these two classes in a lot of detail over at Hearthstone Top Decks, by the way. There's a link down below in the description if you want to read about these last two. That's much more detailed than I can do in a YouTube video. But to summarize the article, Demon Hunter. Aggro Demon Hunter is very, very bad. Crisis is the worst card in the deck. The deck is supposed to be built around that card and it's the worst card. Yeah, it just doesn't work at all. I don't think there's any way you can make it work. Then there's a little bit of a chance to make relics work. Relics are mediocre. They're not great, but they're not super bad either. They're just not worth playing. But if you were to buff up relics, Relic Vault, Relic of Phantasms, Relic of Extinction in particular, maybe lowering the mana costs of them, making them the early game of Fell Demon Hunter. The old Fell Demon Hunter from last expansion is still the best Demon Hunter deck. Yeah, that's how bad things are. But Relic package could be buffed into a form where maybe you can actually play with them. So maybe there's some way to make Demon Hunter relevant. But then there's also Warrior, and Warrior is even worse than Demon Hunter. And Warrior doesn't even have a lot of outs. Like, the best Warrior deck at the moment is Questline Warrior. Yeah, those questlines again. Questline, questline, questline. It's always the questlines. And it's the same Questline Warrior deck that was built on day one of Voice the Sunken City. So we're talking about 4 months old deck, still being the best Warrior deck at the moment. Control Warriors, just about unplayable. Enrage Warriors, they're totally unplayable. So Warrior just has very little going for it. The best Warrior cards with potential, I would say, are Imbued Axe, Burden of Pride, and Remonia. None of these cards are good at the moment. Yeah, they're all pretty bad. But if you were to buff these, like, just cut 1 mana cost from each. 2 mana Imbued Axe, 3 mana Burden of Pride, 6 mana Remonia. They might already be enough to do something. But then again, Control Warrior would still kind of lack a win condition. But there could be a way, because Warrior was nerfed heavily in Sunken City. I almost killed the class, 4 cards were nerfed. What if you just unnerfed those cards, or at least some of those cards, and gave Warrior some win conditions back? Perhaps that would be enough to solve Warrior's problems, but yeah, Warrior is the worst class and it's the most difficult one to fix. Whereas Demon Hunter also doing really poorly, definitely needs buffs. Without buffs there's no chance whatsoever for Warrior or Demon Hunter to rise. But with Demon Hunter at least the relic package shows some promise, so you have like a clear avenue where you want to direct your efforts. And as for the others, Paladin and Rogue are also doing poorly, but maybe they will find some ways to survive if some of the top decks are getting nerfed just a little bit so that they are not too strong. But nerfing them can be hard because there's no clear target in many of those. And even when there's a clear target, like in Naga Priest Serpent Wig, if you touch Serpent Wig, what is going to be left of that deck? So yeah, not an enviable job, and you have to try to somehow make a balance patch that would somehow make it like workable. And I suppose there are some ways to do it, but it's gonna be tough. But with a few nerfs and some buffs, there is some chance to still turn this into a playable meta, even though, funnily enough, some of the classes will probably just play decks from old expansions instead of playing with new cards. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.